Good afternoon. Our presentation is on academic reflections on experiences of BAME students in higher education during COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Evelyn Corrado.
I'm working with Evelyn for this presentation. We both from University of Roehampton, southwest part of London. To be honest, we didn't expect the presentation had to be happening in this high states. So please, feel okay if we feel too nervous or something. Yeah. Okay, Evelyn.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our abstract argues that the COVID-19 pandemic, as we may know, disrupted day-to-day lifestyles of general public and also impacted their health and well-being, and for many, including students in higher education. We also argue that the COVID-19 pandemic also exacerbated the existing inequalities in society, including the attainment gap in higher education. Therefore, the BAME students faced and have continued to face massive pressure, and therefore it is important for higher education institutions to learn and to respect and to listen to the voices of academics and also of students of their experiences post-pandemic. When you look at this graph, according to government statistics, between 2006 until 2021, you can see the number of students aged 18 who are joining higher education according to their ethnicity. You can see there is high increase of students who are coming into higher institutions from Black and Asian and ethnic minority, and hence we argue that it is important for their needs to be met for higher institution or for our education institution to have better student experiences and also better outcomes for our students.
So just to illustrate what important aspects have sort of impacting on us and have been great inspiration for us. So here we talk about three main aspects, which is the first one is really promoted by the Brazilian philosopher or the educator, Paulo Freire, and his critical pedagogy, in a way, has acted a great inspiration for us as an academic and researcher in higher education in the UK. And you can see both of us with ethnic minority background, and we feel quite connected with Freire's lens, in terms of to support academics, support students from disadvantaged background. And we strongly believe education aiming for the education of freedom and also to lead to students' autonomy, independence, and critical thinking in that sense. And then the second inspiration is really about something happened within the pandemic, enhanced by Jeruk's thinking. He published the book, a very influential book, which is Race, Politics, and Pandemic Pedagogy. So his thinking at that particular time calls for the solidarity, the social justice, equity for all human beings in this challenging time. And then the third really is for us at this very challenging time for all of us. After 2 years, we come together. Again, we still have that mentality, thinking about the impact of pandemic on ourselves, on the students we are working with, and the children we have been connected with. So really it's thinking like Cameron and Moss wrote here, COVID-19 has mercilessly exposed the flaws of the societies it has ravaged, which is the inequalities and injustice. As the poor, the precarious, and other vulnerable groups have suffered the most. So on and so forth. It's really a time for us to rethink education, to rethink the way pandemic has impact on our teaching, on our work, and also on our human life in a way, and think about the big issues around the society and how we mitigate these negative impacts.
As Giraud has argued, that teachers, as intellectuals, it is important for us to think critically about our practices and how our practices intertwine with social and cultural and political factors, and especially when reflecting on how we support our BEM students in higher education. As we have argued, BEM university students, both those who are home students, you may know that most of them, they are the first ones in their families to be in higher education, so they are trying to navigate uncharted areas, and also international students who have just moved into our institutions. Some of them were caught up by the pandemic. They were still getting over the culture shock, and then there were closures, and then it's open and it's hybrid, how they are navigating and how we are supporting such students. It's important also to listen to staff experiences, which our paper looks at, because staff are the ones who had to support these students. And so we argue that staff experiences cannot be separated from our students' outcomes. Our methodology.
So we talk about, and we do academic reflection all the time, but for the conference purposes, we have to defend, use academic reflection as part of our methodology for this presentation. As many researchers here address the importance of reflection as part of the emotional and also the intellectual and mental process for us as a human being, as a researcher, and also as a teacher. And there are research in different cultural contexts have been highlighting the importance of reflection in teacher training, and to support the teachers to get that critical lens about what they do and develop, the informed pedagogy and in support of children's learning and development in different across age phase. And also to the relevance of that to higher education for us is, we have the duty, we have the responsibility, to educate reflexive and socially responsible and action-oriented, professionals in contributing to a better future. This is recognized as a core task of higher education, although the purpose of higher education cannot be summarized in this presentation, and it's a big question, but this academic reflection is part of that core task, argued by Treat and Jackson. And also here, we really making our academic reflection all through a sort of professional lens as well, based on we carried out a very small scale sort of study about BEM students during the COVID-19 pandemic across two UK higher education institutions. So we will make some reflections on what we see the students experience during that COVID-19 pandemic, based on focus group interview and individual interview.
So looking at self-reflection on while supporting BEM students, most of them went in a panic mood when the universities closed down. There was increased demand from them for support because they had to navigate, they needed more resources. I recall some students telling me that it was hard for them to study at home because of space issues as well, and some also needed laptops, and they couldn't travel. Some also lost their part-time jobs, so it was hard financially as well. Also, there were issues of technical know-how, and there was higher rate. We have continued to see high rate of BEM students discontinuing with their studies or requesting deferrals for their studies. And a study reported by BBC by Charity Humane has stated that there was increase of mental health issues among higher education students, but it also revealed that only 4% of staff were adequately trained to support students. So from our focus group, the students reported that there was chaotic support from the higher education institutions. They didn't know where to get the information. They were always told to go to the website. There was lack of information. Students with special education needs, they said it was very hard to study online. Some could not follow. Those with mental health struggles, they reported to have suffered because there was not enough support. Where there was support, maybe the well-being officer had only 3 slots for them. But once the student go to see 3 times, doesn't mean the problem has stopped. So they were left without support. So there were a lot of issues around that, and technology support, funding. They were always told to go and go check the website, but there was no one to support them how to navigate the system to get the funding. There were some positives. Some students were happy that when there was hybrid learning, they could go to uni or they could study at home. So some really liked that.
Yeah, I'm just illustrating one of the quotes from our focus group interview. And this is a PhD student, from I'm not saying the country, for ethical issues. And he co-rented a 3 or 2 bedroom apartment in southwest part of London. And the noises was quite, prevalent while he was studying. He felt disturbed, and there is not supportive environments, and the space is limited, and the time for him to really concentrated on his PhD, which was on the final stage of his completing his thesis. So you can see the impact on that. And also he highlighted the online learning, why it's not as good as the in-person learning and in-person interaction with PhD supervisors. So just to give you the sort of snapshot on that focus group interview.
Okay, when we reflect for staff experiences, I believe most of you have had additional workloads. We had to record lectures. I recall recording one lecture 3 hours, trying to upload it, and then it is not uploading, it's bigger than needed. So there was those technical issues, challenges, working from home. If you're a mother like me, you have children barging into your lectures, and balancing that, hybrid learning, teaching resources, maybe your books are in uni and you're at home. There were those issues as well. There was high increase of mental health, seeing colleagues getting ill, COVID-19, and other issues of mental health as well. Career insecurity, threat of redundancy, we faced it as well. So, and we've lost colleagues, and there are many institutions who have done that, and despite the hard work and increased work demand, we argue that there's poor support from HE for academics. We argue that there is this approach in education, which is a capitalist approach in education, which Hill has argued it's called edu business, where the HE seem to value profits more than humans, and it is important that they start valuing students and also the academics who are working in HE. Our recommendation is there's a need, as Robinson has argued, to rethink education because it's not working for many people. And education, as Malaguzzi argued, is always a political discourse. So there's a need to have a critical dialogue in HE. And also, as Hooks and Givens have argued, to have empathy and compassionate support for our students. As this paper is looking at BAME students, especially home students. We said most of them are first generation in higher education and others are international students. We need to have that empathy and compassion when we are supporting these students for better education experience and outcomes. So there's a need to review current policies. If we have policies on equality and diversity, we need to see it in practice, not just in policy as well. As I argued, value humans above profit, give tools to staff and students to reach autonomy and to think independently and self-govern. So our conclusion, we finalize with this quote from Ambassador Matthew Lycroft. He said, "How a society treats its most vulnerable is always a measure of its humanity." So higher education institutions, we argue, should use COVID-19 pandemic setbacks as a learning opportunity to improve all students' experiences, including meeting BAME students' bespoke needs. And we also state that there's need to rethink education, hybrid education, and also capitalist approaches in education, and the social responsibility that higher education has on staff, on students, and also in society. As Freire has argued, hope of liberation does not mean liberation already. It is a continuous process fighting for justice. And so we hope that we'll continue to fight for justice for staff and student autonomy in higher education. Thank you.
Colleagues, good afternoon. I'm here to present results of a study on Black students' conceptions of academic achievement, academic support, which we conducted with Anita Ventouris and Elena Wright last year, a study that was funded by the British Educational Research Association. It was a very interesting presentation from colleagues from Roehampton, and there are a couple of themes that perhaps we might be able to bring together in the discussion. We're probably quite familiar with the context of looking at achievement in higher education. So it looks like the widening participation agenda has been going on for quite a while, has not been challenged. It looks like the laws are quite right. It looks like the policy has achieved certain outcomes, most notably the increased participation rates of so-called Black minority ethnic students, with Black students within that group recording the most growth according to Advanced HE. Nevertheless, there's persistent inequality of outcomes, and very many are wondering the whys and hows of that. This very much is in the policy domain, what policy is concerned about. And I think it's quite useful to look at the wider picture from 2004 up until 2020, so just before the pandemic. We are looking here at the difference in percent between white and Black UK domiciled undergraduate students receiving a good grade, first or two, one, between those years. And you see, with all these rounds of rhetoric, there's very little change. In fact, up until 2010, there was a moderate growth of the so-called attainment gap. And since then, there is a decline, but we still remain in a sort of 20% area of difference in the attainment between white and black UK domicile students. What policy often is not concerned about, or perhaps intentionally does not address, is the challenges caused by sociocultural differences, discrimination, institutional racism, anti-black racism, and also what doesn't quite register often in the public domain is black students' experiences in the UK, how these are accounted for, how these are researched, and how are these theorized. So, conceptualizing the study, we thought that these are largely unaccounted for, under-researched, and under-theorized. And in particular, the last element, there's often a conflict or different views, if you like, about the role of critical race theory. Some argue that critical race theory has been developed in the US, therefore is not applicable to the UK context, but they don't quite propose other conceptual or theoretical frameworks that might be useful. And there are others who argue that critical race theory is, in fact, useful and can be utilized in ways we do research in higher education, and how we understand race, racialization, and so on in the higher education context. So, we have looked at critical race theory, which has informed how we approach and how we define the object of study. That's why we were interested in looking at black students' experiences only. And in previous work, which is under review at the moment with Elena Wright, we looked at conceptions of academic achievement and thematized variation in the ways black students understand academic achievement, ranging from less advanced conceptions like achieving grades and a good degree to more advanced conceptions expanding to contribution to society, liberation that came up in the previous presentation. And also we found very interesting that the awareness of black students in higher education is marked by what we call in phenomenographic research dimensions of variation. So you see the development or the advancement of awareness in relation to agency and context in academic achievement, from absence of agency and awareness of externally determined academic achievement to a more social interactive understanding of academic achievement, complex awareness of agency and social structure relationships. Now, I mentioned earlier the term BME or BAME. We contested the term and we rejected that term. It's conceptually and methodologically unhelpful. That was one of the premises of the study. We considered academic support as a relational phenomenon. It is not what the student does only, it is not what the institution does, it's not what the lecturer does. There's a relationship there between those parts, if you like, and also, and that was a key motivation behind the study, we were interested into whether the support the higher education institutions intend to offer matches with what the expectations are, and whether what is intended is enacted, or to some extent that is enacted. And of course, ultimately, how do black students understand that? We also considered important that variation in the experiences within the group, in this case black students, is what matters. Okay, so very much contesting the homogenization of the group. And of course, different ways of understanding university education relates to qualitatively different outcomes. And in discussion with colleagues, it is important to empiricize students' experience, therefore having a shot, perhaps, to influence policy. We thought hard around the idea of minority. Calling somebody a minority is pronouncing somebody as a minority is not a neutral thing. It is establishing a power relationship between somebody who's legitimized to call themselves majority and positions themselves at the center of educational processes, and somebody else who is put at the periphery, is othered, and their intentions of the place is scrutinized. There is another discussion on whether the term minoritize can be used. So I'm having a quote for Sean Harper here, which is sort of highlighting the minoritization as a process. So not everybody is minoritized on every occasion. So it's very much has to do with the social context and how somebody is rendered a minority in particular situations and institutional environments, and to what extent this sustain and overrepresentation, legitimization, and prevalence of whiteness. With all this in mind, primarily because we were interested in variation, we adopted a phenomenographic approach. We interviewed 20 undergraduate full-time students with the aim of listing collective meaning in the experiences of these students. The call was asking for the following categories that you see on the slide. We excluded international students, as well as the terms race, ethnicity, nationality, citizenship, and so on. And the research was conducted in a single institution. Now, these are the reports how the students describe their background, which, so it shows the limitations, the constraints, if you like, and disparities in how policy talks about groups of students in higher education. I think it's very interesting. Perhaps it's a matter for another study, but I just want to highlight this here. And then I will go through the results. So these are hierarchical ways of looking at academic support. Okay, I will read out a synopsis of each category while you can look at the quotes. So in the first category, at minimum, the academic support is identified as help or guidance for a student at the university, helping out with what they need. This focus was included in all students' interviews. Support means responding to students' needs, coming to my needs, helping out when I'm lacking or where I'm falling short. Moving on to the second category of description, which was about ensuring student understanding of the object of learning, what was taught. So academic support was understood as teachers helping students' understanding of an academic task and guiding them in what they need to know. It is considered a teacher's task to explain the topic, to address student questions, and to respond to students' difficulties in understanding by explaining the topic and ensuring student understanding of the object of learning, what is taught and what is to be learned. Explaining the topic in depth is seen as an expression of care for ensuring student understanding. In a more advanced conception, it's not just ensuring what is taught, but also organizing measures to improve student understanding and performance. So the focus here is placed on ensuring student understanding, it's understood to require going the extra mile for you to understand students' perspective, to address students' questions and concerns, and to identify if they need help and what kind, so they can be directed to the right source of support to achieve their goals. It is also seen to involve responding to and providing feedback on what students need to know in the process of understanding. So the fourth category is, again, broadening the perspective. Here, academic support is understood in terms of organization of mechanisms and/or structures for enhancing learning and academic progress, personal and social well-being, equality and respect for every student as part of the university. Discernment of cultural and ethnic aspects of students' livelihoods was focused upon and seen as important in relation to academic progress and need for support. So there's a quote which is very interesting because it provides an intersection between different positions of the student, single mother, black, need for child support, but also reports some mental health issues. So the outcome space here is providing a map, if you like, of the relationships between these categories. Again, I think the agency and context in academic support is a very interesting dimension. So absence of agency in awareness of externally determined academic support at the beginning. We're looking at, again, more complex awareness of agency, social structure, relationship. That was very common with the previous study that we did on academic achievement. The importance here that we'll bring forward to the discussion is, of course, the fourth category, where all these issues become very, very important, and the individuals are potentially active and they question the position within the wide structure. I've tried to be economical about discussion points. We felt there were quite a few. In terms of methodology and concept that we will use, I think there's a strong case to combine different theoretical frameworks and traditions of epistemological traditions, if you like. Personally, I believe critical race theory is relevant. Those who believe critical race theory is not relevant should perhaps propose their own perspectives. So there's a problem, in my view, in those who critique critical race theory without proposing alternatives. We found phenomenography in this study very useful because it has this heuristic value, and it looks at voices that are marginalized, have not been given opportunity to register the positions and the views. There's a whole lot of discussion about how we theorize all these. Again, there is need for new theoretical approaches. It is important from the emphasis that the students placed on the what is taught, okay, understanding academic support in close relationship with what I'm learning at the university, how good is the teaching, that there needs to be a renewed focus on curriculum, teaching and assessment. That includes revisiting all the efforts about decolonializing the curriculum. It's very important to address and see whether that can help us to enrich or advance the academic support provided to Black students, that they discerned racial ethnic aspects of their experiences at the university, and these were seen as intrinsic to their progress, development, and success. It's also important to look at the role of the lecturer. It looked in the transcript, there was quite a lot about the lecturer mediating a lot of these relationships. We don't quite know if that was something that was intensified because of COVID and various aspects of student support collapsing or being reduced during the pandemic, or this is a standard feature of how academic support is understood. If that is the case, then what is the awareness of the lecturer dealing with students who understand academic support and, as I showed in the previous study, academic achievement is quite important. So, and of course that goes beyond the equality and diversity training that most of us are required to do for 20 minutes online at the beginning of every academic year. Thank you for your attention.
Okay. In our paper, we have used Black, Asian, and ethnic minority, BAME, which is usually used, but we do acknowledge that that whole group, even just Asian or just Black, is not homogeneous. There are many experiences, there are many backgrounds, but for this study, we decided to focus on what is being used currently, and we wanted to hear more voices from all those groups. We also had in our study also white students. We were not, but we wanted to be able to look at the experiences also of white students, of Asian, Black, all of them. But our focus mainly was Black, Asian, and ethnic minority.
Yeah. Can I just add on to Evelyn's points? Underpinning that term for us, I think, is the notion about inclusivity. Although we do feel the problems like what Evelyn already said, but by including all, it's not all, as much as possible, the different groups and from different countries in terms of social cultural backgrounds. And I think that's why our inspirations has come about. It's about the social justice, equity, and the collectivity as a human being, and we aiming high to support all of the human beings in the planet, and to feel good and to feel valued, be part of this, the planet in a sort of, we didn't touch on, but the sort of post-human perspective as well.
We had 3 student advisors on the project that have been monitoring us and advising on language, interview schedule, analysis, results, and so on. So we have discussed this, and the rejection of the term BME on their end was quite strong. In the interviews, asking students to identify themselves, it was very rich and very diverse. So this is where we need to focus. We need to focus on that richness of how people choose to define themselves rather than how the state determine what name applies to different groups of people who came to this country 60 or 70 years ago as part of the colonial legacy. So these are issues that need to be addressed. And the term BME, in my view, is a term of convenience. It was conveniently invented a while ago, and there's a reluctance to move beyond it. Part of that reluctance is the intentional, effort, arrangements not to discuss whiteness. This is the problem, and this is why people object to critical race theory. This is perhaps to some extent why the attainment or awarding gap is stubbornly high. It is because there's no recognition that the structure is white, and the structure determines the language and how people are called or labeled. Let these people determine and decide how they want to be called. So in this study, we've got this richness and this diversity. For me, this is closer to reality, with the conventions of and constraints of an interview, a white researcher asking them questions, and so on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Your presentations were superb. A question to you. So you say that these people, they are all adults, so they have been given the ownership to call themselves anyway. So in which they wish to. But what about school students? Yeah. And a question to you both. You talk about students' experiences, the BAME students' experiences in higher education in COVID. So COVID is something which is absolutely new for everyone. There's no precedent. So how do you reflect on the experiences of the staff? So this I ask not only, I'm a doctoral teaching assistant, so I was doing my doctoral study, but at the same time I was giving pastoral support to my students. So I know how difficult it is when you're wearing the cap of a staff member, as much as, you know, you are a student. So the staff were doing as much as they could. So how are you going to reflect on the staff, the staff experiences? Because from your study, it feels like, you know, you give the students, like the students suffered in a way the staff didn't, or maybe, you know, I don't know how much struggle of the staff you depict in your study. Thank you.
Do you mind clarifying your question just a little, because I missed the last bit?
So what about the school students?
The school students?
Yeah, because you say that for the university students, they have the liberty to choose whether they call themselves a person from the Black, Asian, or minority ethnic community, or they do not want to identify themselves as such. But what about the school students? They are, you know, they fall in those categories. I'm particularly interested because you have to identify them in some way or the other. So while I know that there's a lot of heterogeneity, no homogeneity, so.
Yeah, I mean, my broad perspective, I think, is that in education, it is problematic to call people minority, to minoritize groups. I recognize this is a struggle, okay? It can take place in all sort of levels. It is ongoing. Any progress is not guaranteed. Particularly for compulsory education, there's even more control of the state, policy. Therefore, again, what language is used, how people define themselves, perhaps is a matter of more intense struggle, if you like. But I do see it as a matter of struggle.
So there are multi-layered complexities, if I may say. So what you can give to the adult, you know, students, you might not get it in the school students who are minors. There has to be, like, as the state policy goes, you have to identify them in some way. Of course, it's a struggle. Even I don't acknowledge it, you know, there's the heterogeneity. But yeah, that was just an observation.
I agree.
Yeah, okay. Okay. We had a whole slide on reflection on staff experiences, and that's when we stated that there was increase of work demands, that, and I gave an example, and I can give one. We had to do hybrid teaching. I recall some students who are online and some were in class, and I remember sometimes forgetting the ones who are online, or sometimes them switching off and all that. That increased a lot of stress for staff. It increased also issues of physical health, mental health for staff as well, and we have acknowledged that. Also the technical know-how for using Zoom, some staff really found it difficult, and there was no training because you can't go to uni to be trained. The IT staff, some subordinates seem to have been laid off, so there wasn't lack of that much support for staff. We also stated the threat of redundancy, and we both experienced it in our uni and other unis as well, where some colleagues lost their jobs, and yet you have been working your socks off, and then here you are, instead of getting a flight to Dubai for work well done. So there is a lot of issues, and we have relayed those. Although, and that's why we stated that staff experiences cannot be divorced or separated from students' outcomes. Therefore, HE need to look at how they are supporting their staff as well as how they are supporting all their students, including BAME students. That's our argument.
Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. I wanted to ask you, Mike, a question about your comment that students in your study tended to see the role of the lecturer as kind of mediating. Can you just say a little more about what you mean there? Are you saying that they expect that it's the lecturer who is providing support? And
yeah, there was quite a lot in that area. I'll try to be as concise as possible. It looked that the focus that pre-COVID was shared between academic support, writing support, mental health support, and academic support by the lecturer, it kind of consolidated to the lecturer. So there was a very almost exclusive focus on how the lecturer supports them, not only in terms of what they're learning, but also in terms how does the lecturer organize the measures for academic support, on how the lecturer advances their understanding, their role within the structure, and so on. So it was across all conceptions, the lecturer was at that's why it's one of the dimensions of variation in the results. We were expecting that there would be quite a lot about writing support, mental health support, perhaps support that comes from family, church, and so on. But that just wasn't there. We don't know if that was related to pandemic or not.
interesting that family wasn't really, it's interesting that family and friends were not a part of that, their vision of support.
It was peripheral. They would mention it, but there was a very important focus on what my lecturer does.
My lecturer does.
And on some occasions there was some sensitivity around what the lecturer does not do, including wider attitudes, not just about the learning, whether we're dismissive, whether they were taking care of their needs, and so on. We were surprised as well, but that's why I believe we need to explore different methodological tools to come up with our own proposals on how we can advance the educational reality that we live, rather than wait for policy to determine, to tell us what we experience in higher education. So, and the lecturer has been a struggle terrain, if you like. Universities tend to place focus on a lot of support that they give around that, and claiming that mental health, for example, that is very important. But somehow there's a crucial role there that I think is kind of...
How experienced were your students? Were they first, second, third year students?
There's all 3 years.
All 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. My first point is more of an observation rather than a question, and it's about the rejection of critical race theory. It's an interesting, and that is the only adjective I can think of at the moment, way that critical race theory is somewhat rejected by some academics. I have used the work of Bourdieu, I've used the work of Kant, I've used the work of Heidegger, and no one has turned around and said to me they're going to reject the theories of those three people, and yet it seems that when I bring up critical race theory, it's challenged. So I'm just wondering if that's a further reflection of whiteness and power being misused. So that was more of an observation rather than a question. But my question is about how prepared universities are in order to support the students that it recruits. And I'm wondering if perhaps the rhetoric of preparation, come here, we'll look after you, we'll support your needs, we'll make sure you're catered for, is really just a bit of PR and marketing work rather than the reality that the students experience when they turn up. So I wonder if perhaps universities are putting their business objectives before the objectives of looking after individuals, and they've in some way lost their purpose. And I'd just like to hear reflections on that.
Actually, I really, yeah. So just a quick response to your question. I'm really with you in relation to the marketing model, driven in the high education institutions, maybe across the globe, like Evelyn mentioned. It's about the money, it's about finance, not individual students' learning. And the neoliberal regime, in a way, has put a lot more pressures on higher education institutions, which pretty much about numbers, how many students we are recruiting. And in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, we are from early childhood studies, our subject area, and students being on the decline of our programs. And that's why, some other universities as well started the academic restructuring, in a way, voluntary redundancy spread over, that's sort of threat, to students and to our academic life. And I really feel, the COVID pandemic like sort of trigger for various serious issues for us to rethink higher education, rethink the pedagogy in HE. And I'm really inspired by Henry Giroux' work. The pandemic really is not just about health issue. Actually, it's a combination of all things, education, economy, politics. So I don't have an answer, but I'm really, really with you. Thank you.
Thank you all for your presentations. I guess it's a reflection and also a question to the first presentation. So you said that it was the beginning stages of your study, so you're going to do more, I guess, to have a better understanding, or it's complete?
Our study.
Yeah.
Okay, this this paper is our reflections, but we will write further, because after our reflection, we've just included just a bit of our focus group and interviews, but we are yet to finalize that and write more on that as well.
Thanks for the clarification. I just wanted to urge you then, I know what you're saying about it's good to try and make something for everybody, but one size cannot fit everybody. So when you're doing BAME, particularly the problematic nature of it, I wondered if you could reflect on it, and as well, the fact that you're using international as well as home students. There's differences in our experiences. And also when we're talking about COVID, we need to be aware of the fact that, so for instance, in order to give maybe your research more of an edge, another issue which is not necessarily looked at is the fact that there's higher rates of Black, Asian and minority ethnic populations that were being killed by COVID, that's going to have an effect on the students who are seeing their communities devastated. So I think those nuances also with anti-Asian racism as well, those kind of nuances create different experiences, and that's going to play out in the education system differently. So I urge you to yes, you can still do Black, Asian, minority, ethnic as a group, but within that, the nuances, the different experiences, and also the historical legacies of anti-Black racism and so forth, and Islamophobia, which all have been made worse with COVID. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. It's a start of a very diverse area, but also we can make it quite niche. And also, we are also aware, as she's saying, about edu business as well. We need to be aware for us who are in HE that there is that recruitment of students from minority. We help students, and are they really getting that help? International students, are they coming here and I come from Africa, and so are they just coming here to bring money and not getting value for education? So we're just highlighting those, but we know it's an ongoing research as well. And yeah, but it's a very interesting area as well, and I agree what he's saying, because when I'm not doing this, I also look at it like I'm African. I agree. I never identified as black until I came to UK. So there are a lot of nuances. That's a label I've been labeled since I'm in UK, but I never labeled myself like that in Kenya. So there are a lot of nuances. We just have to disentangle, but at the same time, when you're discussing in education community, we have to say, okay, so we have to change terms sometimes to suit the area, but at the same time, we agree there is a lot of problems in this grouping of people together.